having those smaller sanctuaries in operation like that, because the difference between some of these larger places and the smaller places is that all of our resources are focused in on going on the animals and the animal care. So, which is good because that means, you know, per individual, I think we really focus on spending a lot of time and a lot of resources on their care and well-being. But that means that we're not, you know, we do not have a staff. We do not have, you know, fundraising materials and news and letters that go out in the mail and stuff like that. Because our focus is very different. And so it can be really helpful for us when we do reach people, because we can really help them get to know individual animals at our sanctuary because we spend so much time, you know, focused on them. But it can also be a challenge just to get on people's radar because, you know, we're not as, you know, we're not doing as much on the larger scale marketing and promotions and stuff that some of the other larger farm sanctuaries have the capability to do. And again, I mean, I think the work they do is fantastic because they're saving so many animals and also bringing people to the sanctuary to interact with the animals. But we're you know, never going to be able to match their ability to fundraise and that sort of thing. So it can be a real challenge just to get on people's radar and to help them understand the role that smaller sanctuaries play in the animal rescue kind of field. Because when you say farm sanctuary, the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, farm sanctuary and Woodstock and these larger places that have gained a lot of global attention. And they're wonderful for providing role models and models to kind of, you know, to work towards. But it is a hard challenge if you're living in a suburban neighborhood with a 1/10 of an acre lot to think, okay, I want to open up a sanctuary. That's what I went through years ago when I was started getting interested in farm sanctuaries. I was looking at farm sanctuary with, you know, hundreds of acres and hundreds of animals, or Woodstock. And I was thinking, okay, well, how am I going to raise several $100,000 to buy a property, get a staff, get some animals? And it was just, I hit a wall. You know, it was so intimidating just thinking about the back-end logistics of getting there that it just shut down my thinking process whatsoever. So jumping forward a few years, you know, what we've really tried to think about with the micro-sanctuary idea is not, okay, this is where you have to be in order to have a sanctuary, but what do you have now and how can that become a sanctuary? So, you know, it's making people feel legitimate for having a couple of hens and a rooster. And that's a micro-sanctuary. You know, because those animals have gotten out of the system. They have a place where they're cared for and respected as individuals. And, you know, their life is completely different and they're never going back into the food system again. For me, that is crucial work because, you know, that's an opportunity to get as many individuals as we can out. And so I think one thing that's really important is helping people to understand the legitimacy of smaller sanctuaries as well. You know, it's not a matter of lesser care or lesser attention just because the sanctuary happens to be a little bit smaller. So one of the most you know, rewarding things in doing the work that we have and the outreach that we've been doing through TCA is connecting with people who have a couple of goats and a flock of chickens in their yard and they're vegan and they're like, oh my God, I never knew anybody else was actually doing this and calling it a sanctuary. So it's helping people to see that, wait a minute, I too am a sanctuary, and I think that's very empowering. So now getting back to the other part of your question, yes, we do not have a staff, and that means a lot of hands-on work for us. And as I said before, I had very limited experience with chickens before getting started with this, but you know, unfortunately, a lot of the material that's out there is for how to handle farmed animals is written from a production perspective. So it's like, if your chicken gets bumblefoot, cull. You know, if your chicken gets a spot on her wing, cull. If your chicken gets sick, cull. And we're not going to do that, obviously. So a lot of it is we've been networking with other sanctuaries, and the smaller sanctuaries are so much very approachable. We have a Facebook group called Vegans with Chickens. It's an amazing group, but basically it's individuals, people who have small sanctuaries all coming together on Facebook and saying, I just saw this on my hen's foot, what do I do? And it's obviously not vet care, but what it is people who have hands-on experience working with the animals, giving them an opportunity to share their experience and their information. And it has been a lifesaver. I mean, it is our go-to when something comes up with a chicken because we're more likely to get an honest answer focused on the well-being of the chicken there than going to a typical vet like at NC State or something like that, you know. So it's really a matter of kind of committing yourself to do the research to learn how to interact with them. But I mean, just like the first time you got a dog or a cat, you really have to figure out what it means to care for this animal in the way that is best for his or her species. It is no different for a chicken or a pig. The real difference is our conception. You know, we conceive as dogs or cats as companions, but chickens and pigs and goats and sheep are livestock, and so they live in another totally separate realm from the dogs and the cats. And for me, I think that's a false construction. I mean, I think that they're all individuals, and the way that we relate to them and learn about relating to them and caring for them is the same. It's all just that process of kind of getting to know that species and the individuals and their needs. So it's been a constant learning process for us, and it always will be a learning process. But again, once I think you see yourself as a caregiver, it then becomes just part of your life and part of what you do. And it's totally doable. I mean, if you're interested in something like an internship at Farm Sanctuary or Woodstock, that is definitely a great way to get, you know, hands-on experience while getting a lot of guidance from people who have been doing it for a long time. But you can also do it, you know, yourself in ways that are really that are just as sustainable. It's really just a matter of kind of focusing on the well-being of the chicken. So for me personally, and I think this is true for a lot of people who have sanctuaries, the last thing that I would want to happen is where I'm an administrative person and I'm not spending hours of the day cleaning up chicken poop. I know that sounds kind of funny, but it's actually really rewarding work. And as I said before, I mean, for me, it constantly brings home why it is that I'm vegan. And being able to care for the animals in that way as well as interact with them is the most rewarding thing that I could ever be doing. And the advocacy work really gets fueled by a lot of that. So I'm not going to be taking a vacation anytime soon, but personally for me, that's perfect. But if that's not your lifestyle, I mean, you know, just like you have pet sitters for your dog or cat, you know, you can very easily work in, you know, a little, not always being tied down to your house, but it's really just a matter of kind of what works for you. But again, I mean, the real thing just to keep in mind is, you know, if you commit to rescuing these animals, like what can you do to make their life as you know, happy and as healthy as possible? And that does not necessitate having hundreds of acres and millions of dollars. So that was a really long answer, but hopefully I covered all the bases. So yeah, thanks. Any other questions or comments? Yes. Can you tell us about Mott? Yes. So Mott is going to cycle through here somewhere. Mott is one of our most recent rescues. He is a potbelly pig who was listed as a she for the entire time that he was at a shelter in outside of Charlotte. And pigs come into shelters around this area for a number of reasons, whether they're teacup pigs who people quickly realized actually will not fit into a teacup after about a week or two. So if anybody tries to sell you a teacup pig, please do not fall for it. So he was in a shelter. We have no idea how he got there. He came in as a stray, and his whole period was getting up to its kind of final point where he would most likely have been euthanized. Some people will adopt potbelly pigs as pets. Some people will adopt them and eat them. It's a real crapshoot with shelters. Some are better than others, but most shelters have zero screening process for farmed animals and have a very low adoption fee. So you can go adopt a turkey to eat more cheaply than you can buy one from a farmer. That's a huge problem. So that is part of the reason why we got into doing what we do, was realizing that these animals have this tiny little window in which they can be gotten out of this food system, and very few people are making the most of that and finding them permanent caring homes. So anyway, Mott is a fantastic potbelly pig. He's just amazing. He is very shy. He came into us being really scared of humans. Anne over here was the volunteer who brought him from Gaston County. And in the past 2 weeks that we've had him, he's completely changed. He will roll over for belly rubs occasionally now. He comes up to us and wants to be petted. He wants to eat food from our hands. He now sleeps curled up on blankets in a baby pool. Do not ask me why that works for him, but it works for him, so we're going with it. But yeah, he's a black potbelly pig. He's probably 3 to 4 years old, weighs about 130 pounds. And I love chickens. Chickens are just fantastic, but that is Mott right there. And there's just something about looking into the eye of a pig that makes you realize we're not as much as we think we are. We're not the only ones who have lots of stuff going on upstairs. And if you've not ever spent time around a pig, I beg that you do so, because it will completely just change the way that you see bacon and sausage and all of these other pork products out there, because you realize just how much of a disservice and a travesty it is that we use animals in any way, let alone to just keep them in a crate and then kill them to eat them. So Mott is, yeah, he's an amazing being. I mean, all of our sanctuary residents, I mean, I could just spend all day watching them be who they are. And that is why I think the idea of microsanctuary is so empowering to people, because, yeah, it's scary, but once you get into doing it, I mean, like I said, it completely changes the way that you see animals, your veganism, and why other people should be vegan, because you can always directly connect it to an individual, which I think is the way it should be.
I wonder if, there's a big backyard chicken movement.
Yeah.
That I know there's all the problems with that, but I do think, like, my hope is that the change will happen the other way in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
That if there's activism with that movement where they realize that these chickens that they've become attached to and they have in their backyard, and yes, they're exploiting them for their eggs because they don't know any better, and they bought them,
right,
through some mail order company that's doing all the, that's creating more and more. But I do think that there is some. I've known a few people that had backyard chickens who really would just talk about them like they would talk about their dogs. And yes,
yeah,
they're eating their eggs and they do that.
yeah,
But if you, and this is years ago when I didn't know either. So I do think that there is some hope that there will be a movement through that venue that will, some of those people will have an aha moment,
right,
if they're educated, to say,
right,
oh, it's not good for my chickens to
right,
lay this many eggs. Oh, this is,
yeah. Well, and see, the danger is with like improvements in environmental efficiency. Like the better gas mileage you get, the more likely you are to drive farther. My perspective on it is that the difference between a backyard flock and a battery cage is really an aesthetic difference. Ethically, the chickens are still in the same position. So the problem is that the messages that backyard chicken keepers are getting are, you're awesome. They're not getting the message that, hey, wait a minute, have you thought about this? And that's what we're trying to do. We rarely talk about factory farming through Triangle Chance for All. We're more interested in engaging people in conversations on, hey, we have 22 chickens here, 20 of them came from backyard chicken flocks. Let's talk about why they suffered in that system. And, and I think, hopefully, people will recognize that and pay attention, because we've gotten into some fairly contentious debates about, well, I treat my chickens like they're family members, and yeah, I still eat their eggs, but whatever. And I'm like, well, let me talk to you about the biology of chickens, and when you eat their eggs, you're basically normalizing the consumption of their eggs, and you're therefore normalizing and supporting the persistence of domesticated chickens, which, when they go through that experience every single day, that can never be okay. There can never be a happy egg, and you realize that when you watch a chicken in the nest for 2 hours a day, and she's very clearly not happy. And there's no chicken who gets to escape that. So, yeah, so the trick is not patting people on the back when they're doing something that's better than factory farming, but also, kind of trying to educate them about the larger issue.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, my thinking in that was definitely to hoping that they would realize what they're doing
Right.
is wrong, so that they stop
Mm-hmm.
the eggs,
Right.
and that if the next time, and that basically converted having backyard chickens into a backyard sanctuary,
Right.
so that in the future, rather than supporting that system,
Yep.
if they wanted to have chickens, they would adopt.
Yeah, and that does happen, right? And that has happened. We've told the stories of some people who got sheep to raise for meat, and they had an epiphany and said, "Oh my God, I'm vegan." And that does happen. The trick is that if the messages that you're hearing when you have that backyard flock is, "Yay, backyard chickens, I love eggs," it makes it harder, I think, a lot of times to have that epiphany. So it is really important, I think, that as vegan advocates and as people who have sanctuaries or interact with sanctuaries to be able to talk about why even those forms of better use are actually still really problematic. And for me, it always comes back to the individuals, because every single species you can directly point to biological problems that result from the process of making them, making them food. So yeah, it's a great point, and I would follow that up with just, we need to find better ways to communicate with that sort of subset of people to help educate them about why, instead of eating the eggs and having a backyard flock, why not create a sanctuary, So yeah. But yeah, I've encountered a number of people who rescue chickens and then use them for eggs after that, and for me, that's a real problem. So.
I would think
Well, it's part of our culture too. We all call ourselves animal lovers while we eat, hamburgers and stuff like that. So it's a real trick to. It's really easy to compartmentalize like that, but if you can maximize that individual connection with an animal and then turn that into potentially a fulcrum for getting them to go vegan, that's great. Bye. So yeah, thank. So any other last questions? Or yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I wondered if that's a more recent kind of development or research about
Yeah.
sanctuaries.
I think it's mostly just really a lack of telling that part of the story, because there have been sanctuaries around that have been doing that for a long time, but I think just in the past few years, I think of sanctuaries getting on the radar more, especially of vegans as well. And I mean, I know I was the same way. I was like, okay, eggs are out. I'm not paying any attention anymore. But then when you have chickens and you have eggs in your yard, you're like, crap, what do I do with the eggs? So yeah, it's new knowledge to a lot of people. And I think that's a really cool way to have that conversation about why is eating eggs an unethical act. And you can talk about, well, the chickens love to eat them, the chickens need that nutrition back. But it is not something that people talk about very much. And I think a lot of it too is that in the industry's eyes and in even veterinarians' eyes who deal with poultry, a chicken eating her egg is like the worst thing ever. It was funny. Yeah, we actually have a really good bird vet in Durham, and when we took our first chicken in, and we're like, yeah, we feed the eggs back to the chickens. He's like, oh, wait a minute, don't do that because they'll start breaking all the eggs. And we're like, we're vegan. He's like, okay, well, never mind then. See, that's the thing is that when they're thinking of it from you want to harvest those eggs, why would you let your chicken eat the egg? And again, like I said before, it's the chicken's property. Why are we eating it? So yeah, it's really interesting though. But yeah, not much of that is told. Because I think also too, a lot of people are grossed out about that idea. Somehow it's gross for a hen to eat her own egg, but we can go to town on them. That's fine. So I don't know, but yeah, I mean, hopefully, we can start to tell more of these stories and get the awareness out, because, there are so many instances in which you can tell the story of the individual animals and why, anything other than veganism is a disservice to them. So yeah, that's a great point. So. Okay.
It gets really weird when these people who have backyard chickens, if we have an acquaintance who we used to be better friends with, and we still were, we would just directly be like, guy. But it's kind of, I vacillate between hope and just kind of, oh my god.
Yeah.
Because he's the kind of person who like absolutely loves these chickens, because they all have names and all of that, but he still eats chicken.
Mm-hmm.
Not just he eats the eggs, he still eats chicken. And I'll see him post on Facebook an article about insects and ask people not to squish insects. And like the other day, someone posted about finding a snake and killing it. He got all up in arms that the guy killed the snake. So I I don't know. It's like I try to just influence his thinking
Right.
on if I'm liking his post, and he's like, don't kill insects and snakes,
Right.
and then ignoring it,
Yeah.
and he like said something about chicken.
Yeah.
But it just gets really weird, and it's hard to.
Yeah. I mean, being in animal rescue and vegan advocacy is an experiment in human psychology. And I have not figured it out after 15 years of being vegan, because, that sort of thing, just the ability to compartmentalize and to attach to specific instances. I mean, we see it happen in society all the time. A cow gets loose from a slaughterhouse and runs down, through the middle of downtown, and everybody wants to find that cow a good home. while they're watching TV with a hamburger, you know? And how that happens, I have no idea. I mean, you know.
Or it's like the turkey who gets
Pardoned every, oh, God. And then who, yeah. 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 I mean, yeah, and that psychology, I'm not sure we're ever going to figure it out, but yeah, I mean, you know, and that's why so much of advocacy work is individual, because you have to figure out where that, you have to like triangulate where that person is, and to animals and to food, and you know, and so I've not figured it out. So.
My plan is eventually one of the chickens will get sick, and then I'll just hear about it and send them your way.
Yeah, so yeah, if you ever run into people who have problems and are like that, just send them to me. I'll take care of it. So. But yeah, because I have nothing else to do in my life. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're one-stop shop for vegan, going vegan. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, please check us out on Facebook, Triangle Chance for All. Please check out our website and stay in touch. We'll have lots of events and other kind of outreach and involvement opportunities. So I'd love to continue this conversation. So thanks for listening to me. Yes.